So Ephesians chapter 2, verse 4. But God, who is rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved, and raised us up together, and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in the ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. By the way, if you've missed the previous weeks or you want to look back at what we've gone over and listen to and see me do these drawings, these beautiful artistic drawings in live fashion. It is both on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page, actually. And if you go on our website, you can click on a link and it takes you to our YouTube site, which has Sunday morning and Sunday evening and Wednesday night things that I've uploaded there from the last couple of years, if you're interested. And if you're not, that's fine too. So we start with verse 8 here. And what's the first thing you notice in verse 8?
For. What did you say? For.
Very good, Rob. The word for. So the word for indicates what?
This is the reasoning.
Reasoning or conclusion. That's very good, Rob. See? Man, you are on top of things tonight.
You've hit me over the head many times, Doug.
So we have to understand what's the conclusion or the reasoning that Paul is relaying here. He's going to tell, so he's going back, he's referring backwards to verse 7. In the ages to come, God the Father will show the exceeding riches of his grace in his kindness toward us in Christ Jesus, for by grace. So you know that these two are connected here. So there is a connection between these verses with the word for telling us the function of this verse. It is his conclusion or his reasoning for what he just said, that God is going to show, he's going to put on display in eternity future his grace toward us in Christ Jesus. Now that gives us an indication, as we talked about last week, that we are the recipients of this great gift of God, and it comes in Christ Jesus. The gift is found in Christ Jesus. We're the recipients, and grace is something that we don't do. It's something that is done toward us, correct?
Yes.
So when we get into verse 8 and we begin to look at this wonderful verse, verse 8 is probably one of the most well-known verses amongst Christians. It is verses 8 and 9, I should say. It is a deep verse. It is a rich verse, a beautiful verse. We have to understand the function of the word grace. Remember, grace is what? What is the definition? If we were to define grace, what do we call that?
Unmerited favor.
Unmerited favor. So it is favor that is shown to you, that is given to you, that you don't deserve. You didn't earn, you didn't do anything for. You get it, it's free. When we read back in Genesis chapter 6 that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, so often we read the story of Noah and it comes across as Noah was righteous, Noah did good things, and therefore God saved him.
Yeah.
Except that at the very beginning of that entire story, that entire account, it says Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And if we understand grace to be undeserved or unmerited or unearned, then God did not save Noah because he was righteous. God saved Noah because God is gracious. Because Noah didn't even deserve to be saved from the flood. He deserved to die in the flood, just like everybody else. He may have been more righteous than everybody else, but he wasn't righteous enough to earn God's favor. He found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Not justice, but grace. So when Paul comes in here and says, for by grace, he's pointing us backwards to the previous verse, which is a verse showing what God is going to be doing for us and to us for all eternity, and saying that that same grace is what God showed you when he saved you.
That's something how it's flipped, because when you say for by grace you have been, it's from the past.
Right.
And verse 7 is future.
Correct. So he points to the future and then says, you can count on the future because of what God has done for you in the past. So look backwards to what God has done for you that guarantees your future, which is, again, a beautiful picture of why we can trust that once saved, always saved, is because anything that comes to us from God comes by grace. It's not dependent on us. It's dependent on God, who is gracious. So for by grace you have been saved through faith. So have been saved, obviously, is in a tense that is looking backwards, right? So it's past tense. Have been saved, or in this sense, have been has more of a, again, that aorist tense. It's the point in time. This is not saying that it was a process. It's not saying that it's ongoing necessarily. It's saying that your salvation happened. You have been saved. This aspect of salvation is what we would call justification. Now, when we use the term saved in the Bible, when the Bible uses the term saved, it uses it a number of different ways. Sometimes it refers specifically to the point in time where the gospel became clear to us by the grace of God. We were regenerated and turned in faith to Christ, and therefore were justified. That is what we call salvation. You got saved. We use the term that way. You got saved. Sometimes the word saved, which is used in the Bible to refer to the ongoing salvation we are experiencing. Paul will say that you are being saved through Jesus Christ. He says that many, many times. You are being saved. And then sometimes it refers to actually, and that's sanctification. And sometimes it refers to the final act when Jesus comes back, or when we die before Jesus comes back, and we are immediately made righteous, completely righteous. And Paul will say, you will be saved from wrath to come. And that is our glorification. Those are the three theological terms: justification, sanctification, and glorification, that encompass the entirety of our salvation. The point in time where it begins in history, the ongoing increase in righteousness, and then the final point where we are made completely righteous. So at the beginning, we're declared righteous, justification. We are then being made righteous, sanctification. And then at one point, we are completely made righteous, which is glorification. And all of those are found in the word saved. This one, in this particular case, is talking about our justification. And he says, that's by grace. You have been saved by God's grace. In other words, that's monergistic. Remember that word, monergism, monergistic? What does that mean?
God does it.
One work.
One work, one person working.
One work.
As opposed to synergistic, which our sanctification can be said to be synergistic. We're at work, and that's going to be down here in verse 10. He's actually going to refer to our sanctification, which is more of a synergism. But the justification and the glorification, by the way, are all monergistic. It's God acting. It's God's grace. It's God's action. Now, it is interesting that we are not complete silent partners in this. We are not just coasting in this. It is through faith. So we have been saved by God's grace. It's his work, and he uses faith, through faith. Now that might seem to, if you think about it, be difficult for us to understand. If our justification is monergistic, it's completely God's work, how does faith work in that? How does faith come into that? Isn't faith something we bring to the table?
No, it's his.
Well, you have to read on.
Which is very good. You have to read on. Now, here's where grammar is important. And I know y'all don't like grammar that much, but I love it. So I'm going to go over it. So you have here the word that, which is an interesting word. And you have it is in italics. What does that mean again?
Not in the original text. It was added.
Yeah, it's not in the Greek. It's provided by the translators. It's not necessarily wrong to have it there. It's just to make sense of the sentence. They put those words in there in the English. But what is important is the word gift here, because both the word that and the word gift are in a particular form. They're in the neuter gender. So it's like it. That's why they translated it, because that's neuter, as opposed to he or she. Here you have he, right here is obviously masculine, and then she would be feminine. It's interesting, in the Greek here, the word grace is feminine. The word faith is feminine. And the word saved is masculine. Salvation is masculine. So if he wanted to refer to either grace or salvation, us are being saved, or faith in talking about what is not of yourselves and what is the gift of God, he would have used either feminine or he would have used masculine if he wanted to talk about one of those. Because in an inflected language like Greek or Italian or Spanish, the genders have to match between identifiers, between nouns and things that identify them. So, and we have the same in English too, for the most part. If we use, although nowadays you never know, they're using plurals because gender has apparently become,
Can't use he or she.
Yeah, now it's they. Although I refuse to use that because there is gender and it's binary. So in English, we have, if you say John went to the store, then if you were going to use a pronoun, you would say he bought some milk. If you say John went to the store, it makes no sense to say she bought some milk, or even it bought some milk. In the English, we're very specific with our genders. They must match. And they do in Spanish, and they do in Italian, they do in Greek as well. The genders have to match. And so the question is, what is the word that? I'm running out of time. I might not make it through this verse. At 10 minutes. The question is, what is that is not of yourselves, and what is the gift referring to? And the answer is, it cannot refer to grace, it cannot refer to salvation, and it cannot refer to faith individually. It can't refer to any of those three things individually. What it can refer to is the entire process. Salvation by grace through faith. Because when you have feminine and masculine together, you can't refer to it in the feminine tense, and you can't, or gender, and you can't refer to it in the masculine gender. The only option you have is to refer to it in the neuter gender. And so that's what Paul is doing here. He is saying that the entire process of salvation by grace through faith has nothing to do with yourselves. That process is the gift of God. And in that case, everything involved is also the gift of God. So the process and the individual components of the process are all not of yourselves, and they are the gift of God. This is one of the reasons why we believe that faith is not something you drum up on your own. It is not a work that you bring to the table. It is not something that is unique in an individual who comes to Christ. They had enough faith. They just believed. I won't say those kinds of words. What I would say is that was a gift of God. God gave them the faith because he saved them by his grace through faith.
You know, it's something that through the natural mind, when you look at that, you say, for by grace you have been saved through faith. The natural mind will think, well, I have faith.
Right. It's my faith.
Yeah.
And Paul goes to great pains using grammar to disprove that view. And it's difficult for us to understand, because we don't like to get deep like that, but it is very clear that what Paul is saying is that everything involved in your justification is a gift of God. It's all of God. Therefore, God gets all the glory. And that's where he goes in verse 9. It's not, none of this, salvation by grace through faith, is of works. In other words, none of it is something you do. None of it is something you had. None of it is something that is part of you. It's all a gift of God, not of works, so that, or lest, anyone should boast. The idea here is that only God has the right to boast. Only God has the right to take any credit for our salvation. And I'm thankful, honestly, for that, not because I like it theologically, but because if it was up to me to bring anything to the table, I would mess it up. I don't have enough faith. I've proved that over and over. I don't have enough faith now in order to guarantee my salvation. If it was dependent on me, I'd blow it. I blow it every day. And so thankfully, salvation is up to God. It's his work. It's his action. It's his gift. It is not of me, not of yourselves. It is the gift of God. So it's not a work, and it's not something that is inherent in anybody. It's not something that's part of anybody. It is something that comes from outside. It is the gift of God. It is something that is given to the individual. Now, gosh, I don't want to go. I'm trying to decide if I want to go on. No, I think I'm going to stop there. No, you know what? I want to keep going. And if we don't finish verse 10, that's okay. We'll come back to it. So he introduces the concept of works here in verse 9. And I think works is an important concept for us as Christians to understand, because we are required to do good works. It's expected of us. It is something that when you read the entire New Testament, when you read the Old Testament, anybody who belongs to God is supposed to live a different life. We are to be different. We are to keep the 10 Commandments. We have a lot of expectation in our lives. There is a high standard for a Christian. And so it does not give us an out that we can just go do what we want simply because salvation is not of ourselves, it's not of works, so we can go do whatever we want. And that's where verse 10 comes in. And he again begins verse 10 with the word for. And that says that this entire thing is a conclusion or a point that he is bringing out from the previous verse, and we know he's bringing it all the way back to works. And how do we know that? Because he uses the word workmanship, right?
Workmanship, yeah.
And so he uses the concept of works here. And then he's also going to emphasize works again here. And so his support for his conclusion, or his reasoning for what he is about to say, is that he wants to go back and talk about our works. Because even though works aren't something that bring about salvation, what he's going to indicate for us in verse 10 is that works are a necessary result of salvation.
Because of the gift that he's given us.
Correct. The gift of this salvation that he works in our life is going to bring about his work, his continued work, and that's where this goes on, his continued work in our lives, which brings about the result, the necessary result of good works. And I'm going to go into more detail as we look at this next week, and maybe we'll actually get together next week. The works that we do are a necessary illustration of, necessary support of, necessary proof of the work that God is doing in us. And we can go to Philippians as well to look at that passage where he deals with the fact that he began a good work in us, and the fact that we must be careful to maintain good works, and that the work of God in our lives is that we would produce fruit. And so you have all of these passages that come from Jesus, from Paul, from all of these people that talked about good works as being a necessary result of our salvation. So this is where Paul is going with this, and then he's going to begin to define in chapter 2 and 3 what these good works look like. And that's where we'll pick up for next week, is exactly what this means, how important it is, what does the end of this, how does the end of this verse relate to the work of God, and how that all looks. And that's really what the next few chapters in Ephesians is going to be about, is our good works as part of his work in us. Any questions about all of that?